Well, I'm on Facebook Live again, and lots to talk about tonight. My friend Jacob is curious as to a post that I made earlier on Facebook, so I'm going to address that a little later. Can't start off Facebook on a negative note. I'm going to start off on a positive note. So I want to talk about a few things. So because I'm going on live, I decided I'm going to wear a shirt. You can see I have a t-shirt on my shirt, but I decide might as well look decent, so I'm going to wear a shirt. See the backdrop? There's lots of lights on in the backdrop. So that's all the silo where all those lawyers, I'm right in the heart of the financial district in Toronto. So the backdrop is the silo where all those lawyers are working. And the only reason you could see all the lights in the high rises behind me is because generally after hours I turn my main lights off. I turn the main lights off, the fluorescence lights, and just have localized small desk lamp on so that I can read and so on and so forth. But in terms of the large lighting, I don't need it, so I turn it off. But I want to talk about what makes an excellent litigator, because there are a few young litigators. I have a young neighbor next door to me who is going to be an amazing litigator as soon as his confidence reaches 100%. I mean, this young lawyer has such good instincts. His instincts are well. His knowledge is above average. And the sort of work that he's producing so far has resulted in some excellent court decisions, some of which have been reporting. His name is Yixin. Well, I don't think I'm pronouncing it right. He's Chinese. Yixin or Yixing Wang. He's my neighbor next door. So I knew this young lawyer since he came in as a student. So he comes over, and the sort of interaction and intellectual discussion we have, I look forward to it because it's a young lawyer who you can see has a grasp of where he has to go, but he has no issue in terms of looking to more experienced lawyers for guidance, for their point of view on things. And so I'm sort of like a mentor to the young Mr. Wang, one of his mentors. And so I tend to really enjoy having him around. Except that I think when his confidence needs to be on par with his knowledge and his brilliance. So as soon as his confidence reaches at a proportional level to his brilliance, his knowledge, and the sort of work that he produces, he's going to turn into an amazing young litigator. This is his first year of practice, and some of the work that he's produced have resulted in some significant legal decisions to date. So that young lawyer is sitting pretty in terms of the sort of stuff he's doing, and I'm happy to associate it with him and the sort of work that he's doing. Rainmakers. When I was a rainmaker from since before I became a lawyer. When I went to the law firm that I was doing my articles at, a lot of clients were coming to that law firm because of me. So when I was articling, I brought in close to 40 clients. to the law firm that I was articulating at, Rhodes Schwartz and Associates. And so in terms of the cost of me being at that firm as a student, I was kind of paying for myself with the sort of clients that I was bringing in. So that by the time I got called to the bar, I had a lot of say in terms of how much money I was expecting, to make, because I knew how much money the potential clients were worth in terms of the work. So being a rainmaker is important. I'm looking at there's a young rainmaker, and that young rainmaker probably, that I know, is probably bringing in millions of dollars to her law firm. And, she's kind of upkeeping 3 or 4 other lawyers with the sort of work that she's bringing in. And that's the quintessence of a rainmaker. A rainmaker is somebody who not only brings in clients to the firm, but brings in clients who are bringing in money. So the clients aren't coming and saying, well, I have a case and I want you to fight this case, and then when you win this case, you will get paid. Some of that is completely acceptable, but you also need clients who come in and can make a deposit, a financial deposit on anticipated fees and disbursements, so that staff can be paid, expenses could be paid, overhead could be paid, and the law firm could be operating on a fungible footing. So that's part of what the quintessence of a rainmaker is. So rainmakers in law firms are really, really important, because rainmakers are persons who kind of set themselves above the other lawyers, because they're not only having their skills being showcased, but they're also showing who they are by bringing in money, bringing in clients. Clients are money. And they're also certainly showing their worth by being a public face of a law firm, whether it's by giving speeches or writing articles, or supporting political parties, supporting political candidates, being involved in philanthropic activities, mentoring young people, being a socialite, any number of different personality traits that differentiate that person and puts that person a notch above the rest of the pack. So rainmakers are legal sellers, so they're good at selling their services, and they're good at getting paid. So I always admire rainmakers because of those characteristics. So rainmakers, risk takers, motivators, dominants, they tend to have power and influence on other people, and they tend to be engaging people, right? On good days, I have the characteristics. Well, I'm a type A personality, so I have the characteristics of a rainmaker. I can be dominant, and I can be engaging, and I can intersect those two personalities and get to where I want to go. So that's part of the characteristics of rainmakers. Rainmakers, as well, are not people who see themselves as 9 to 5 personalities. So rainmakers would do the little extra, like what time is it? It's now 10. 11:29 p.m. and I'm in my office chatting on Facebook Live. Chatting on Facebook Live is not chatting for the sake of chatting. Chatting on Facebook Live is engaging with people who follow me on Facebook and other social media, because of course when I do this Facebook Live, I also download it and post it on my Twitter and my upload it to YouTube. So I don't only keep my Facebook Live on Facebook, I kind of keep it as a vlog on my other social media sites so that other people can go at their own leisure and benefit from what I have to say. So Facebook Live is one of the ways which lawyers, without too much technology, because you don't need to have a TV crew and you don't need to have editors and all kind of stuff, even though I do have access to video editors. You don't need to have that to really do Facebook Live. You simply need to be able to go live on your phone, and there you go. You sit down and you could reach out to as many people who want to engage with you on Facebook Live. So right now there's no one that liked share or commented on my Facebook Live tonight, so I'm not sure if I'm reaching the right audience tonight, because I haven't gotten any interaction from any of the people who are tuned in. Something was reported in the newspaper today that troubled me, and it's a case of a young lawyer. My understanding is the lawyer, I haven't interacted with him personally in terms of face-to-face, but I've been assisting the young lawyer in his difficulties with the Nova Scotia Bar Society, Lyle Howe. Lyle Howe is one of a few, very, very few black criminal defense lawyers in Nova Scotia, a province that has a historic black population, yet there are very few black defense lawyers, right? For reasons that defy logic. Really, it defies logic. And one has to be able to look at the decision makers in the eyes and tell them as it is. The Nova Scotia Bar Society is going after Lyle Howe, saying that he's incompetent and he finds himself in numerous conflicts of interest, and they're trying to revoke his law license. So the papers reported today that Lyle Howe Law Society hearing has cost the Nova Scotia Bar Society, and by extension lawyers, over $900,000, right? Over $900,000 the Nova Scotia Bar Association has thrown into trying to get Lyle Howe to lose his law license. Lyle Howe is a young man. He's been practicing law for less than 5 years. A lot of lawyers that I know, even in a case that I just dealt with, I was just in a project called Project Claudia, and there was one lawyer representing 10 clients in the same case, right? That is conflicts of interest built upon conflict of interest. And that lawyer wasn't called out. That lawyer wasn't subject to disciplinary action. Nothing happened to that lawyer. I had another case that I dealt with recently where this law firm, big law firm with influential lawyers, they were representing one party to a dispute, and another party to the dispute approached them and they dropped that particular client and took on the other side. Like when you talk about conflict of interest, nothing screams conflict of interest more than that. Not only do they do that, but they recommended a lawyer who should take over the file from them. And so here you had this client who has never really had issues to deal with that he was faced with, being opposed by the lawyers, the law firm that previously represented him, and had a lawyer representing him who that law firm on the opposite side recommended. That is a conflict of interest of significant proportion, and things like that. Those lawyers, no one goes after them. But here it is, Lal Howe, young, black, sole practitioner, not a lot of influence within the legal profession in Nova Scotia. And so the Law Society in Nova Scotia sees him as an easy target. The fortunate thing about Lal Howe is Lal's case now goes down in history as one of the longest Law Society hearings, because Lal Howe is not going down without a fight, and I admire him for that. And I kind of assist him in terms of sending them case law that I think is appropriate, and by talking to him when he's a little down, because certainly the way that the Nova Scotia Bar Association is approaching Lal Howe supports an inference that systemic racism is at play. The Nova Scotia Bar Association has a history of going after black lawyers. They did the same thing with Rocky Jones and other black lawyers that I know. So that is not new, but Lal Howe is taking a stand, taking a firm stance, and he's not going down without a fight. And for that, I salute him. Got a big inquest coming up. And I think what is interesting about these inquests is in Ontario, unlike other places, when the police exercise its options or discretion or power to use deadly force or lethal force that results in the death of a citizen, we have numerous civil society bodies, statutory bodies that look into the death and look at how such a death could be prevented. Excuse me. And so that was the case with Michael Luku. Michael Luku was a refugee from Sudan, black, suffering from mental illness, was probably using or abusing alcohol or substances, and lived in a home for persons who suffered mental illness. The building where he lived was rented by the Canadian Mental Health Association. So the police responded there and found Andrew Luku, acting erratically. And within 90 seconds of the police arrival on the scene, Andrew Luku was dead. And so some of us are asking the question that in terms of how this case is dealt with, whether or not certain intersecting issues should be looked at. So whether his race was a factor, whether his mental illness was a factor, whether the substance abuse was a factor, we say that the intersectionality of all these issues have to be looked at. So you can't look at these issues in isolation. You have to look at the intersectionality of these issues. And so I'm one of the lawyers that will be involved in that inquest. There's Howard Morton QC, who was the former head of the SIU. Lots of lawyers for the city and the police. There's about 8 of them. Right? There's Diane Dimmer, Marion Wright, Gil Glickman, Gary Cluley, Jimmy Lee, MTS Bala. So that's 6 already. And then you have Coroner's Counsel makes 7. So you have 7 lawyers representing the state at that inquest. And then you have Howard Morton QC, myself, Jonathan Scheim, and Brees Davies representing certain interest groups, including the Black Action Defense Committee, the Canadian Civil Rights Civil Liberties Association, the Empowerment Council, and a few others. So quite a stellar cast of lawyers in that particular high-profile inquest that's coming up. So that's something, that inquest, the pre-inquest starts on January 26th, and the full inquest starts in June of 2017. So full cast of characters, and so it will be quite the inquest to watch, given the high-profile personalities in terms of lawyers who are involved. So I'm looking forward to that particular inquest that's coming up. We just got disclosure for Matthew Green's case. Matthew Green is a city councilor from Hamilton who has a complaint that he was arbitrarily stopped by the police, partly because of his race. And so we just got disclosure in that case, and it's a lot of disclosure to review. So I've already started going through that disclosure, and we're sort of preparing for our pre-hearing that begins on January 31st. So on January 31st, we get to discuss pre-trial issues, including motions. So I have to figure out what kind of disclosure, further disclosure we need, and what other issues will arise in this hearing. And so that's the sort of stage that we're at with Andrew Loku's case. I'm also going to be doing some legal issues in Guyana. I mean, Guyana has some really fundamental, interesting legal issues coming up. The first one is, and the most high-profile one of late, is JCOM. So the Guyana Elections Commission appointments and the interpretation of Section 161 of the Constitution. That's a really important case, and the opposition leader has signaled that he may be seeking an interpretation from the Caribbean Court of Justice. So if that is to occur, I'm sure that I will want to be involved and to seek standing on behalf of civil society groups, so that our voice has been heard on an issue so fundamental to society. So that's that's an issue that's really interesting in the Guyana context. That's happening in 2017. Another issue that's really going to be important in Guyana is how does that country deal with all the issues of corruption that is alleged to have taken place for the past 23 years. So um, that will be something that will be high on the agenda for the current government, and there have been a large budget allocated for external legal counsel to engage as special prosecutors. So something that we have to watch. Guyana recently brought in its own civil proceeding rules. And so I downloaded the civil proceeding rules because I'm an attorney at law there as well. And I need to know the civil proceeding rules. That civil rules is over 200 pages, so it's quite a lot to read through. But quite a lot of reading, but the 2016 rules, obviously it's in force now, so we all will have to read it. So I'm now kind of going through it so that I can understand it in case I have to engage in litigation there. I'm quite familiar with those rules, and I'm able to do my work having regard to the rules that are now in place. There's a debate in Trinidad on the marriage laws. What I find interesting about the marriage laws in Trinidad is that the Attorney General of Trinidad spoke about a significant amount of persons, some of them over 50, who are marrying 11-year-old girls. The newspapers today reported that Trinidad and Tobago reported over 3,000 child marriages in 2 decades. Right? Over 3,000 child marriages in the last 20 years in Trinidad and Tobago. Some of the girls as young as 11 and 12-year-olds to men as old as 56 years old. That, I don't know whether it's custom, but how can that be right when you have statutory rape laws, when you have age of consent, and all that sort of stuff? You have a law like this that's in conflict not only with the law itself, but I think there's a consensus. In most societies, there's a consensus that one should not be able to have sexual relations with someone under the age of 16. And yet Trinidad is one of 8 countries in the world where someone could be married at the age of 12. I think the government is right to move to change that law, because that can't be a law. That can't be a law that is fair, that is just, and that is respectful of the development of children. I mean, it cannot be. So I'm going to sign off in a few minutes from this Facebook Live because I've discussed the topics that I want to discuss. So let's see who is online. Oh, my buddy Matthew Green is online. Hey, Matthew, how are you? Get at me. So let's see what outside looks like tonight. See, all the lights are on in the silos. All those are the high-rise buildings downtown. See the silos? These are where all the Rainmakers are on Bay Street. So seems like they're all up, and look, it's full moon tonight, so all the bad people are going to be out. I don't know if any of you are superstitious, but they say when it's full moon, a lot of interestingly weird things happen. So, given that interestingly weird things happen, I'm going to try to head out of here very shortly, head home, get some rest, and come back tomorrow, Friday, and continue.